Hello, listeners, and welcome to Fighting Failures. So this is the first episode of our next section, all about conservation. I'm your host, Sandhya.
I'm Isho. No, hi, I'm Theo Ansel. I'm guesting on this one.
So we're recording this before the episode that Theo was in and originally supposed to be guesting in. It's all fine. I'll write about the shenanigans on the blog because that's not for the podcast. Anyway, Sandhya, what are we talking about in this episode?
So today we're going to be discussing wildlife conservation, particularly surrounding issues like habitat destruction and poaching. All right, so let's get into some problems surrounding this topic. First of all, poaching. Poaching leads to a decrease in wildlife population and an increase in endangered species. So this is kind of the thing that everyone is always talking about and hearing. Poaching in Africa or Latin America, where hunters are killing animals for natural resources like tusks or horns, or taking animals from their natural habitats to use as exotic pets or for breeding.
Yeah, animal trafficking is just problematic on so many levels, and wildlife trade is definitely an issue.
Definitely very, very illegal as well.
Also, might have been one of the start of a few epidemics. So that's also an issue, and of course epidemics lead to mass creations and mass job destruction. So that's a lot of issues that also coincide with environmental problems.
It's a bit like the butterfly effect in that a small thing, like maybe someone poaching one animal in one small area of one country, can lead to a worldwide pandemic through a chain reaction almost. So small change can make a big difference, and you always have to be careful of your actions.
It's always the pangolins as well. I think they might have learned by now.
It's all about the money.
Unfortunately.
Okay, so the thing is, when animals are taken from their habitats to be sold as exotic pets, or for breeding, or for whatever purpose that someone might be wanting to sell them abroad for, the animal is not taken into an environment which is suitable for them to live. This can affect the animal's behavior, and almost negatively affects this animal's behavior. So whenever an animal is taken abroad, like there are some cases when maybe the animal is treated nicely, but that is still not the right environment for it to be in, because it's not socially communicating with other animals of kind, it's not living in the proper environment, and often they are maltreated and abused. And this can do several things. It can make this animal a danger to itself, and it can also make it a danger to other animals around it. And the humans who are not taking proper care of it are also in danger. I heard the story of this chimpanzee who lived in this woman's apartment, and the chimpanzee had been maltreated by the woman. It wasn't treated well. It had been taken out of its natural habitat, and that resulted in that chimpanzee ripping off their neighbor's face. So that was not a particularly nice scenario, but it was one that did happen because an animal had been taken abroad to a different environment and it had been maltreated. And this is often what happens when you destroy these circumstances and environments for animals in such a fashion.
I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Rio, but essentially this bird has been taken from its habitat and doesn't know how to fly once it's fully grown.
I have seen that one, not for a very long time. Yeah, it's a good example. I've not seen that movie for a very long time. It's like a second.
How old is it?
Yeah, there is.
It's like 2011.
It's like an old animated Disney movie or something.
Yeah, 2011.
Pixar. Is it Disney or is it Pixar? I can't remember.
Pixar usually does some of them.
Are they the same now?
Pixar is owned by Disney.
They get the guy who plays Mark Zuckerberg in the Social Circle to play.
It does have a second, actually.
Yeah, Rio 2 was 2014.
And the second one goes into habitat destruction as well, even, where the birds are losing their, I guess, natural habitat because of tree destruction in Rio, I guess.
Would you say that Rio is a good sort of way to get an idea of the dangers of habitat destruction and the killing of wild animals and that sort of thing? Or is it a bit exaggeratory or not very informative?
It's meant to be entertainment. It's meant to be entertainment for children, but it does, at the beginning of the first movie, it's like all these birds singing, and the baby bird gets taken from its, from this, happy area and put in a box where it's really scared, I guess. It's just supposed to be a movie for children, but it touches on topics. It hints at topics that are relevant.
Somehow a parrot ends up in my home state, Minnesota, I'm pretty sure. So that's my claim to fame for that movie. So yeah.
Great. So, human population explosion leads to human expansion, which in turn leads to habitat destruction and deforestation. So, this is going to be covered into a future episode, but I think I'll give you a quick sort of crash course on this. So, when there's this thing called the demographic transition model. So, basically, when humans are advancing in their technology, it means that people suddenly stop dying. They stop dying of infectious diseases because of medicine, and maybe they stop dying of other causes like injuries because they can have better protection. So when humans stop dying, but they keep having babies at the same level as before, the population just explodes. But this new population needs a way to sustain itself, for example, for food or for places to live. And this means that people often destroy habitats to sort of make space for themselves. So a great example of this is, say, in Brazil, where the Amazon rainforest is just being decimated by people trying to grow soy or grow not grow but have space to graze cattle to feed a huge growing population in both that area and abroad.
And here's the thing, right? So I read this article from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America, I think, and it states clearly that the human's great expansion, it's a population explosion, was around 55,000 years ago in Africa, and this diaspora of human travel occupying almost all of the Earth's habitable land were all from Africa, and it's all this gigantic population explosion of us kind of going out and heading into all these new environments. And this has led to humans basically kind of claiming all the Earth's habitable land, and that is both good and problematic on many levels.
I mean, the whole world used to be a forest, almost all. Like, maybe not places like the Sahara Desert, but over time, you'd be amazed at how much landscapes changed, but you'd also be amazed at how few places are actually naturally a farm, like a farm sort of field. When we think of the countryside, even if you think of a sustainable countryside, we're going to be imagining a place with a bit of forest, quite a lot of rolling fields. That's quite idyllic. But really, probably all the land in the UK used to be like a beautiful forest. Maybe there's places like, the savannah that are sort of grassy land with some trees, or the Sahara, which is quite a desert. But really, the world was meant to be a forest.
I think deserts, mountain, and forests are the three calmest environments because, like, back in the days of Pangea, we had this massive continent, supermassive, and in the middle it was just a massive desert with a bunch of mountains, and then on the outside, which was the majority of it, was forest. And people have come, basically knocked down all the forest, killed a bunch of the animals. Well, this is after Pangea still, of course. But we've knocked down the forest to make land, we've killed the animals to make land, we've done everything to assimilate this environment to our needs, and this has led to lots of different fauna and species being just wiped straight off the face of the planet, and that's not particularly great for wildlife conservation.
I don't know how relevant of an example it is, but you know how you have refugees who are forced out of their homeland and sent to like other places, but then often they're rejected from those places as well. You get that kind of thing with animals where humans have destroyed their homeland and the place where they're living, and then forcing them out of those territories, but they have nowhere to go because humans are literally everywhere.
I think that's, it's somewhat similar to the case in Syria where you have this government that's oppressing the people. Well, I hope Bashar doesn't listen to this podcast, but you have this government oppressing the people, and then the people do anything back, and their entire country gets destroyed. They basically have to flee the country, and then no one will take them, and they're stuck in these massive camps. And sometimes the European countries let them in, like Germany or other countries like that, but there's huge swaths of people, because you can't take in millions of people into your environment, and that's unsustainable in of itself. And that's similar to animals. Like when people come to this country, like people, and they oppress animals, and the animals fight back and then have to flee because their environment's being ruined. Who's going to take them? There's not room for them anywhere else. That the environment isn't suited to them. This is not an easily assimilatable environment. Like these animals are not able to just move around willy-nilly like it's like some sort of game. And that's the same with people.
Yeah, so the wildlife on Earth has suffered greatly as a result of this, being forced, as we said, a bit like a refugee, from their natural habitats, or just killed off by humans as they destroy the natural habitats to build cities, as I said, urbanization, or create farmland, whether that's to grow like genetically modified soy or graze cattle, both very unsustainable practices. But, where can these animals go when there are humans everywhere? Like Theo said, there's nowhere for them to go. They're backed into a corner and then they're just killed. It's really not quite nice if you're sort of an endangered animal.
And taking a step back here, the growth of population, this boom, the second boom, which has happened recently, where just people are having babies upon babies, that's not helped the problem. It's really not helped. This is because when you have more people, more space is needed to fit, and for that you need more food, and for more food you need to take more land, and it's all coming back to taking more and more land. Where are these animals meant to go if they're being pushed across the way? Because all of these people are moving outward and they're being clumped into these smaller and smaller spaces. And eventually, that's not going to be habitable for them. We need more space because we're having so many babies. But this is the opposite effect on animals. Their population is decreasing because there is nowhere for them to go. They are being pushed in smaller and smaller spaces, which they often cannot live in. And that just results in their animal kingdoms collapsing. Not kingdoms, their species and their food webs collapsing, yeah.
So if you think about it, there's realistically only a certain amount of biomass that the Earth can support. This obviously varies depending on how many trophic levels there are in a food chain. But if you imagine it as sort of like a square, and the top of the square is like 100%, this is all the biomass that Earth can support. And then you sort of split it up like with different colors based on like the different species. And so as humans go up and become a bigger percentage of the sort of maximum amount of biomass the Earth can support, this means that something else has to break, right? If humans go up, something has to go down, whether it's sort of a whole range of animals slightly decreasing or some species just completely being decimated. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that sort of human biomass or human cultivated biomass is about more than 90% of all the world's biomass. So you can just imagine a graph where the number of humans and human sort of based biomass are just going up, and this means that everything else has to go down. I'll probably put a chart like that in the description so you can sort of get what I'm aiming to sort of express here. I'll put it on the Instagram, that sort of thing. So yeah.
And kind of a resulting issue with that is we have, even if these animals' environments are not being completely eliminated and destroyed and kind of gone through extreme chaos, what we do have is we have habitat fragmentation. Now, what is habitat fragmentation? Well, it is when we have a decrease in the overall area, but it's slightly different. We are splitting up all of these ecosystems into like different parts. And what it does is it undermines the integrity of entire ecosystems. It breaks up these areas. Roads are examples. Like if you put a massive road down in the middle of a jungle, this road becomes a barrier. And if you want to cross it, it could be the last thing you do because the car could kill you. And a patch of the woodlands on the other side of that road, for example, or the patch of grass, might be just a little bit away, but it's nearly impossible to get to because you've just got this small barrier, but it's so impenetrable for many animals that aren't suited to just scampering across like a possibly busy road. And whether it's something that was intentional or not, these places are being divided, and the species territory is being divided into smaller areas, and these smaller areas cannot sustain these creatures.
Definitely. And also, to add on that, when you're having like habitat fragmentation, especially when the areas are biodiverse in both animals and fauna that require different conditions, those animals won't have like the specific conditions that they need, perhaps. Like if it's a greater ecosystem that has lots of different fauna in smaller chunks, and you split that, the animals who rely on both areas, both chunks of both groups of like fauna, they're going to suffer, and they're going to decrease because they don't have access to the food and nutrients they need on both sides of the road, perhaps.
Let's get a little bit into the nitty-gritty, like the details of statistics. So approximately 30,000 species per year, that's around, give or take 3 an hour, are being driven to extinction. 30,000. And approximately 80% of the decline in global biological diversity is caused by habitat. So 80% of these animals that are dying are being killed by the destruction of environment. And now the other 20% are probably dying naturally because of just the changing ways. But when people like to claim that, oh, climate change is doing nothing, these animals die normally, no. The vast majority of these animals and fauna and any species are dying because of the fact that we are not conserving wildlife, we are hurting them.
Also, wildlife habitat in the world is being destroyed at a rate of approximately 5,760 acres per day, or 240 acres per hour. So we are rapidly destroying these animals' territory, and they're not moving or being able to adapt fast enough to the new environments they're being pushed to survive.
Let's say, okay, so here's the statistic. 4% of the animals in the world are wild animals. The other 96% are all not wild or tamed, are just part of the normal system. 4% are wild. 36% are human beings. So the other 60 now around are ours, and that 60% are usually mainly comprised of farm animals, maybe like 0.5% per pet. But we'll get into farm animals later. And this means that what we used to have is 100% wild animals, and now we have 4%. And this is somewhat due to destruction of environment. This is somewhat due to mass breeding of animals. But what we cannot say is that nothing has happened to these animals that has pushed them out of their environment and has ruined lots of their ecosystems. Because why else would there only be 4% from 100% in this many years?
Here's another statistic, because I can't say that word. We were talking about poaching earlier, and the ivory trade especially is a large part of that, and approximately 60% of elephants died at the hands of poachers for their ivory.
Yeah. The ivory trade is very, very. It's been such a terrible trade. It's had this very long, elongated, disgusting history. We had 26 million elephants. How many do we have now? 1 million. We have decreased their population by 1 to 26. This is just so many are dying, and so many have died. Their population has basically become a tiny fraction of it. And there was actually an attempt to stop this. So there was a worldwide ban on ivory sales in 1989, but due to lots of countries in Asia and Southern Africa trying to meet economical demands and wanting economical demands, so they can make more money, they repealed it, and they allowed two different types of sanctions for sales of ivory. They're still sanctions, but they are not sanctioned. They were once sanctioned, and now they are no longer sanctioned, and that is because of the special chemical.
Like it was said, poaching is very illegal.
Yeah, every year poachers take more than 38 million animals from the wild of Brazil to meet the global demand for illegal wildlife. Most are birds, and they're definitely become caged pets for people in Rio de Janeiro, Sydney, Madrid, New York, Chicago, etc. This is what we're talking about with Rio. These animals are being taken from their natural habitat, and they are being shoved in these random places so that people can have a nice pet, and that does not work. This is not, you are not treating the animals well if you are moving them from an environment that they're supposed to live in to your small apartment in New York. That is not a habitat for a parasite, especially when you have them in those little cages for 12 hours a day. That's just not sustainable.
Thousands of individuals are arrested for poaching in the United States each year, and that's just in the United States. But even then, experts believe that only between 1 and 5% of poachers are caught. So if thousands of individuals are being caught, and they believe that's barely 5% of all the poachers, think about the disaster and devastation they're wreaking on the ecosystems of these animals.
Well, there is a disaster. 1 century ago, just a century, African wild dogs in packs were usually consisting of around 100 members. Now, the African wild dog average pack is 10. That is a massive decrease in numbers. You have minus 90% of that pack, and you only have that 10% left, and that's only in 1 century that these African wild dogs have had to go more scarce.
Mm-hmm. And sorry to go back a bit, but about the thing, in the United States, if only 1 to 5% of poachers are caught, imagine what that would be like in countries where the policing isn't up to standard, where there's corruption, And those are usually the countries where there's actually a lot of like sort of more endangered wildlife, like lions and elephants that you don't see in the US. Obviously, there's sort of a lot of other different animals that are protected in the US, but the US has pretty powerful police and army. In a country like Zambia, just to pick one out of a hat, their police force might not be able to deal with these sort of incidents in the same way. So imagine what a small percentage would be caught there. It's just insane.
Well, I think there are like in a country like India, where it's basically impossible for the government. Well, the BJP would try and do it, but they don't really care. When you have this government that doesn't care about it, we have these massive amounts of trading going on in India, and no one's really shutting it down. And it's also the same in countries like Malaysia or Thailand or China, South Africa, even Kenya, which is meant to be the country where animals are supposed to have a nice safari. They are still being basically captured and sold. So basically, when you go to Kenya, what you'll see is this lovely like nice safari, but that's the bit you see. That's the tourist area. You don't really usually go out of that bit. If you left quite that bit and went to the actual other parts of Kenya, what you might see is these animals basically being packed away and sold, because that is a major benefit for the economy of Kenya. So the government's opinion is, why not? Because that's going to get them a lot of money, and they don't see an issue with it. So countries in Latin America, biodiversity has decreased by approximately 83% since 1970. 83%. That is just appalling. Yeah.
Also, going back to the U.S., there are more than 1.5 million collisions between vehicles and deer each year in the United States. And like, people aren't doing things to protect these like deer. They might have signs on the side of the road that say like, watch out for deer. But these things happen in like the middle of the night, and people aren't watching out for these animals who, like, again, it's the habitat fragmentation. There's a road in the middle of their territory, and that's why they're being hit, because they're trying to get to the places where they have made their homes.
Again, it's the fragmentation that they cannot pass by. It's basically impossible for them to pass by. That's causing them these issues. And I'd like to bring up something quickly, which is wildlife trade. There are many issues with wildlife trade. It harms human livelihoods because people depend on these local animals for meat and these local trees for fuel, and they also make up traditional medicines for many people in the area. And if we're taking all this from these people, that is very detrimental. And these people, although maybe these practices aren't the best, this is also part of their environment. This is also part of their way of life. They aren't basically killing all the animals, because that's not going to be able to be sustainable. But we have these big people come in, kill the animals, leave. That's not only harmful to the animals, it's also harmful to the humans nearby. And, of course, it harms the balance of nature when we're doing this, because we're over-harvesting animals and plants, and that's exploitation of species. And that means that basically all these things are going to die. And imagine that all the predators die. Well, the chain below that's just going to grow and grow and grow. They're going to eat all the natural sources of food, and then there's going to be nothing left, and they're all going to starve. So all the animals have now died in this food chain because some of the animals that people like are being taken out of it. And it also can cause, well, more indirect harm, although I'd still call it somewhat direct, in the fact that we are introducing these invasive species which prey or compete with the native species, and this means that that is another example of direct overexploitation by humans of species. And this has actually often been purposely introduced, so that's why I said it was somewhat directly. So the American mink and many countless fauna and plant species have been introduced to do this. And this can also mean that we have incidental killing of non-target species, so like dolphins and seabirds. Might accidentally be killed if we're looking for a specific nice little fish. Like a golden fish, we might kill 100 dolphins to get one of them. And it is estimated over 1/4 of the global marine fisheries catch is incidental, unwanted, and discarded. So 1/4 might be a dolphin or a seabird. They'll just kill it. They don't release it back into the ocean. They kill it in most cases. And incidental killing also happens on land. So like a musk deer or a duiker will be killed by crude traps, and this will not only cause issues for that one animal, that will also cause issues for many other animals that might need to eat them, might need to that might need to grow. Because if there's lots of plants and they're growing too much, these animals might be keeping it in place, and that has all been collapsed because of that.
And that's called a keystone species, like a species whose environment and ecosystem relies on that species for stability.
Okay, so let's look into some solutions. Well, of course, the big one is don't buy things that have come from killing endangered species. Ivory, leopard furs, etc. These things are clearly things that have been poached. Don't buy them. They are very harmful.
So this comes down to supply and demand, right?
Also, you realize that ivory from an elephant tusk or a rhino horn is literally made out of the same stuff as your fingernails. So top tip, if you're feeling like ivory, just grow your fingernails really long and there you go. In fact, it's made of the same stuff as your hair. Just cut off your hair, pretend it's a horn, and you've got basically what is chemically identical.
I feel like this is the beginning of some sort of Hannibal Lecter figure who just goes around stealing people's hair to make ivory.
I mean, I don't know about a chemical process or to make hair look like ivory, even though it's obviously made of the same thing. I think it's called keratin. But yeah, I mean,
I think it's made of slightly different things, Oscar. Because I read where is it? I had a site before. I've lost it now, but it had it was talking about a biologist who was looking into the chemical properties of ivory. And talking about how to make synthetic ivory to essentially decrease the demand for real ivory.
It'd be a bit weird if you get your ivory and it's full of cartilage and you're like, what have I just done? But I guess you could in theory do that. But if you're that desperate for ivory, go ahead, fella. But so what were you saying about supply and demand, Sandra?
Yeah, so it essentially comes down to supply and demand. People want the people who want ivory are encouraging the people who poach these animals. They're encouraging them to get the ivory. So if you decrease the demand for these things, if people stop wanting the ivory, then the people poaching it won't feel the need to kill these animals for the ivory and to supply those resources. So one thing on this is to check the materials on things you buy. I know sometimes they're kind of secret or hidden, and decorations, especially decorations and jewelry might have ivory, but refrain from buying things that contain that kind of thing.
So a good thing to do in that situation is sort of think about the product you want to buy and just look up on a website, is it ethical? Look up ethical alternatives. So say you wanted to buy diamonds. Some diamonds can be produced synthetically, which is good, but some diamonds are produced through child labor. So just look up ethical diamonds. There'll be a website that'll come up and it'll tell you what's the best diamonds to get if you're concerned about something like child labor. And I assume it'll be the same sort of thing if you're looking to get something like leopard fur or a piano with ivory-ish keys. Or I'm really not sure what sort of stuff could be risky, but if you're just worried, just look up if it's ethical and someone will have already done the research for you.
I think often actually the issue when you're not buying all these diamonds, for example, the Democratic Republic of the Congo might have a lot of child labor getting diamonds, but diamonds also constitute a very large portion of their economy. So when you're taking this large portion of their economy and discarding it, they're all going to be poorer. And this means that what happens is that these families get poorer and poorer, and that means the children need to work anyway. So it's kind of an inescapable issue in the sense that you need a very kind of precise solution to get around it. For what I would do instead of necessarily not buying stuff is lobby for things to be made with more ethical care, right? Because if we're not, what we're doing is basically child labor might be happening anyway because we're collapsing an economy and people need to still be able to take care of their children and need to be able to take care of their family and put food on the table, and that might have the children working. So it's quite complicated what to do about that sort of thing.
I'd never thought of it that way, but it's evil either way. You don't buy the diamonds and you starve the children of any money, or you do buy the diamonds and you're reinforcing a sort of child labor loop. And so I guess what you want to do there is sort of like you said, sort of trying to break free of the loop by sort of lobbying or having activism to try and make the situation better on the whole in the DRC.
Yeah, get countries like Norway who provide a lot of foreign aid to say, we aren't going to give you as much money as we will give you unless you start ethically using workers. Like, issues with countries like Democratic Republic of the Congo is there's a lot of work and there's not much results. If we create better working conditions, better living conditions, people will work better, and they won't need to have all this manual labor, etc., because they are getting better conditions to work in, better places to live in, and that means that their work on the whole is better. So that's kind of the issue. That's kind of one of the solutions.
That's a really good point, that foreign aid should be in many ways conditional, so that countries who want it have to actually do some work and just receive aid and then spend it on a new presidential palace or something like that. So
not so conditional that the fact that their country's not getting any money because they might need some, but yet conditional to the fact that this is what we're gonna, like, half your spending is what happens. And that is enough of a motive for that country to do that. And countries like Norway haven't done that yet, although Norway should be doing that. And if Norway has been doing that, they've not been doing it on the scale of level to, like, necessarily fix these problems, because we're still seeing child labor in the country.
All right, moving on a little bit further from poaching, still a little bit in that area, we need to create protected areas for animals to roam and interact properly without humans messing up their ecosystems. So we have national parks, which are a great example of this, especially protected areas where poaching, and they have special rules against poaching and general destruction of the ecosystems and fauna around that area. And that can really support the animals, to give them a place to live, even though those areas are often used for recreational sightseeing.
Yeah, because even if they are used for that, these areas will still have strict laws against poaching, fishing, anything in general that will hurt that environment. And it also helps, in a sense, stabilize that land around them, because you're preserving the natural landscape of the area instead of course, destroying it. And that creates and you're no longer creating large man-made areas that don't integrate with the natural landscape. What you are doing is you are stabilizing that natural landscape. And this can prevent lots of natural disasters that stem from issues like erosion, where you are eroding.
Yeah. And then I want to go on a rant about zoos here, because they are like the worse version. They're like a slightly better version of the just taking the animals out of their habitats and treating them humanely, but not letting them interact and behave like in the natural way. So they're just being fed they're being human fed, so they're relying on humans for everything, and they often don't have their own areas. So it's just, even though it's it's not bad, they're not terrible. They're treating the animals humanely. It's better than the poaching business, which is very illegal, but it's still not good for the behavior. Yeah.
This is not a verified statistic, but around 99%, this is actually not a statistic at all. But in my opinion, around 99% of zoos, their main purpose is not conservation; it is profit, and this is quite problematic. What are the profits of zoos? Well, if you get some simple math, let's say that it's $23 for an adult, maybe $14 for a kid. What we're getting, $1.85 million in a month, in an entire, just 1 month. That is around, give or take, 18 million in a year, 20 million in a year. That is a lot of money, and of course, a lot of that is going to the animals and paying people, but you still have a lot of that money left over. You are getting a lot of profit off zoos. You're not going to go bankrupt if you open up a zoo that's a large zoo. And of course, another fun little piece of information is that people might say in the zoo, well, okay, so lots of animals are losing their habitat because of expansion of human activity. Yet zoos serve the results of animal agriculture to the masses of visitors flooding through the gate every day. So it's a little bit hypocritical of zoos to be claiming that, and it kind of puts doubt on whether they're actually going for conservation or more for profit. And of course, there's the issues with animal psychology, issues with animal breeding, issues with naturality, and issues with education, lifespan, happiness, etc. But that's a lot for me to talk about, so I won't get into it.
Hopping back to the national parks quickly, because I just want to talk about some things, especially how people are helping to prevent poaching. I I have an experience where can't remember which park it was. It was in Zambia. We were in Zambia, and we were at a park and doing, like, the safari and everything. And there was a lion who was caught in a poaching trap. So they can't entirely prevent poachers from coming, but they're doing what they can to help the animals who are being, like, affected by these poachers, and doing their best to keep the poachers out, even so. But this lion had been caught in a poacher's trap, and there were, the lion was in trouble, so they shot it with a tranquilizing dart, and my dad actually got out of the truck to help lift the lion, and they lifted the lion to bring it back to their facility to help get the poaching trap off the lion's neck. So they're helping these animals, and they're doing their best to keep this, like, area, like, free of human, like, interference.
I think basically my opinion on the fact is zoos should be transformed into sanctuaries. That will mean that there might not be as many visitors or picnic areas or gigantic walkways or refreshments, but it will mean that these animals live out their lives by having just every square inch, every square centimeter of space on the ground, and they get to live in an environment that is healthier for them. And I think that, of course, enjoyment is great, but both mental and physical health is a little bit more paramount overall.
I think national parks are so much better. In the UK, this is probably different in the US, where you have a mixture of zoos and national parks, but in the UK, national parks, then you don't sort of get your big endangered wildlife. There's a lot of wildlife that is endangered, especially things like birds, can be quite endangered, but in a national park, especially in Africa, I'm thinking, is that you're, first of all, supporting a way for the animals to live in the wild and naturally, but also what you're doing as a tourist is supporting the locals, like your tour guides and the rangers, meaning that people get money and they don't have to go into poaching to try and make a living. They can make money off tourism, and so it's beneficial for both the animals and the humans that could be poaching the animals. So definitely, obviously, there's a problem with plane travel to get there, but if you're in a place where you can visit a national park, then definitely do that over a zoo.
Yeah, well, a lot of the animals in the US that are exotic are in circuses, traveling circuses mainly, which is not great for them because they are traveling around the entire country, usually not kept very well, and forced to do tricks that they do not want to do and live in small cages. So the US really hasn't done much to stop that, unlike other countries.
Yes, I think in the UK, there's when we went to a circus recently, which had some animals, and the only animals they had were horses, which are regularly trained. I'm not going to comment on whether or not it's ethical to train horses, but they are regularly accepted as sort of a trained animal, and dogs, and then some doves, I think. But there weren't any sort of lions or monkeys or anything exotic like that.
A lot of elephants in the US as well.
And actually, it's actually a huge problem in India, where there's a huge problem of especially temples using elephants and just whipping them and forcing to do them stuff. So you wouldn't necessarily think of that like a circus, but it's a similarly big problem for the elephants in that situation.
Elephants are just generally have the bad side of the spectrum, don't they?
They deserve a huge amount of respect.
Yeah, they're lovely animals, aren't they? They can, like, hug other elephants and remember other elephants for, like, 40 years. I can't remember quite the statistics, but they're better than a lot of others.
Those poor elephants.
I have more of an issue with elephants being wiped out than pandas, but neither is good.
Yeah, what would we do without elephants? We already lost mammoths.
Do we have anything else to comment on the solution section before we...
I think those are some pretty solid solutions.
Okay, so moving on to the video club. I don't know. You guys don't have to... I don't think you guys had the time to watch it. But it's a short 4-minute video about these 6 rhinos who were rescued from poaching by this organization in South Africa called the Hoedspruit Endangered Species Center. So they have vets who help save those rhinos. I think in the video there was 2 rhinos who lost their horns and 4 orphaned rhinos whose parents were killed by poachers. And they talked about how the rhino's horn is attached to their nasal bone. So if the horn is completely removed, you get this hole in the middle of their skull that needs to be completely reformed. And so they have these vets who are helping these rhinos and were able to save these rhinos by helping reform their skull and saved them. Also, this center does complete rehabilitation. So they have their, what are they called? They're helpers and rangers, essentially. They only have a few working with each rhino, so the rhino doesn't get attached to humans and can easily be rehabilitated into the wild if they need to.
You guys listening at home should definitely watch it. So is that all then?
Yes. Yes, it is, I think. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Well, thank you guys for having me on for an episode I was not expecting to be on, but somehow ended up participating in. It was really interesting to talk about that.
Yeah, you were very intelligent. You spoke very well about all this. It was super well done. Thank you everyone at home for listening. Make sure to go watch that video and implement the solutions where applicable in your daily life. Go visit a national park if it's nearby you and it's local, it's environmentally friendly to do so. Donate to sort of charities as well. Sandhya, we can probably link some of those in the description. They're working on the ground to, I guess, stop poaching, be conflicted about whether or not to buy diamonds.
Yeah.
See you in the next episode, guys. Bye.
Bye.